In 2024, you would assume that we would have solved the majority of the world's secrets given the state of science and technology. But the present world is full of wonders that are found practically every day, and there are historical mysteries that are still unanswered or even disproved in the sense that we believe they could have been solved with ease. The Egyptian pyramids are a major mystery that serve as a testament to human ingenuity, but how much do we actually know about them? Come along as we look at 5 reasons why scientists find the pyramids in Egypt terrifying. Number 5. When it comes to the pyramids, particularly the ones in Giza, it's crucial to keep in mind that we also need to examine what's outside of them. Yes, it's true that treasures surround the tombs of the pharaohs and other individuals who built these structures, but that doesn't explain how the pyramids were constructed in the first place. If you were to examine the outside of the pyramids, you would notice that some of the building materials may not be what you would expect. For instance, the outer regions of the third pyramid, in particular, contain granite. Because granite was the most expensive and durable building material in antiquity, it is one of the best ways to assess the values and practices of ancient cultures due to the high cost of its use. It is true that in the past, people may have chosen to use more expensive but durable materials when they wanted things to last, but since other Egyptian pyramids did not have that feature, why were the pyramids of Giza so different? Yes, but keep in mind that things like pyramids weren't meant to be wonders of the world per se, rather, they were meant to be significant in the here and now. So every clue that we find out about them is equally important regardless of how small or what material that it's made of. That's what many want to know, and many have even said that these secret Jews are being ignored by others due to the more treasure-ridden aspects of Egyptology. Number 4. The way the ancient Egyptians built not only the pyramids of Giza, but all of the pyramids they ever built is without a doubt the greatest mystery that genuinely terrifies people in the scientific community. Keep in mind that this was ancient Egypt, so they didn't have things like heavy machinery, conveyor belts, or certain safety equipment. Instead, they had to do this with nothing more than basic tools and people power. This is why the mystery surrounding the pyramids has lasted for so long. The largest pyramid in Giza is 481 feet high and more than 750 feet wide. It is astounding to think that the pyramids in Giza were built in just 60 years, given the amount of heavy stones that would have to be moved to the location and gradually stacked over time. Fortunately, there are some minor clues as to how the Egyptians managed to complete the task, which was based on a find that demonstrated simple construction methods. To put it simply, they discovered ramps on paths leading to the pyramids, and these ramps were sufficient to help push the stone blocks up and into a position near them. So if they could do that on the ground, why not around the pyramid? Indeed, they could if you imagine it as a massive, sloping platform where the stones could be moved into positions that would reduce worker risk and guarantee they weren't wearing themselves out attempting to move the stones to where they needed to be. Another well-established hypothesis holds that the building materials were floated down the Nile River and that unique channels were subsequently constructed to transport them from the river to the construction site. While this theory doesn't fully explain what may have happened, it does provide some more context. Number 3. This is something you've probably never considered. When you envision the pyramids, do you have a clear idea of how they would be described based on what you've seen on television and in pictures? You would probably mention their shape, of course, but that's where things get interesting today. They're brownish and have all kinds of indentions, and you can see the wear and tear from being exposed to the sun, the wind, and the sands of Egypt for over 4,500 years, but when they were first completed, it was a whole other story. It's important to keep in mind that the pyramids were constructed for purposes far beyond what we now consider them to be, such as study centers and tourist attractions. In fact, when the Egyptians constructed them, they did so in such a way that they shone in the sun and were perfectly smooth. They could be seen for miles around, and the light from the sun would have probably blinded anyone who looked directly at them. Sadly, this is not how we see them today. The stone structures show signs of wear and tear, which is unfortunate because you could only imagine how much more magnificent they would have appeared up close if they had been in their peak form. While it's true that their worn sheen adds to their mystique, you almost wish they could be seen shining at least once in their original form to see things as the Egyptians saw them when they first built them. And considering the time and effort they put into making them smooth and shiny, they would probably be horrified to see how they've become. Number 2. These are precisely constructed pyramids. They are not just something you manufacture and hope you get right. Another aspect of pyramid construction that people love to talk about is the precision with which they were built. In order to ensure that everything was as precisely as possible, the Egyptians built the pyramids of Giza, which are almost perfectly aligned with the 4 cardinal directions. If you were to visit the pyramids, you would be able to determine which way was north, south, east, and west. Essentially, they used the stars above to determine where to place the pyramids precisely on those points because those directions didn't even exist in the ways that we think of them now. It's thought that the ancient Egyptians used the fall equinox to help align everything to the cardinal directions nearly perfectly. Even more, a massive test was conducted to determine whether the equinox could have allowed for such precision in placement. The results showed that it could, and since the equinox is a universal constant, the Egyptians may have used it for construction purposes back in ancient times. We all know that they did something along those lines because the three pyramids are all placed exactly the same. Although this theory is promising, it is difficult to prove. The irony is that, despite having meticulous records about some aspects of history, the Egyptians did not leave behind blueprints for building the pyramids. This is one of the most terrifying things about the pyramids and Egypt itself, which is why people are trying to dissect them from top to bottom in order to learn as much as they can about them and understand Egyptian culture. As you can imagine, this is still a work in progress, but who knows where we'll end up in the future. Number 1. Another major issue with the lack of conclusive evidence regarding how the ancient Egyptians constructed the pyramids is the proliferation of myths and legends about them that lack logic or supporting evidence. For example, there are long-standing myths that claim slave labor was a major factor in the construction of the pyramids of Giza during the relevant time period. While it is true that the Egyptians did own slaves throughout history, the question of whether or not slaves actually built the pyramids has been hotly contested for decades. One piece of evidence that appeared to refute the notion was the tombs of the construction workers. The little, 9-foot-deep pits they discovered contained 12 pyramid bones. You might be wondering, well, what does that all prove? Well, consider it this way. Builders preserved flawlessly by dry sand, complete with jars of beer and food for the afterlife. Remember that in Egyptian culture, it was crucial to ensure that objects were buried and preserved in order to ensure safe passage into the afterlife. If these were slaves and were treated like dirt by the ancient Egyptians, then why would they be buried so precisely in the ground and given certain things for the afterlife? To be clear, they weren't mummified because they weren't significant enough for that, but since care was taken in their burials and preservation, why would that occur if they were slaves? It's true that building the pyramids wasn't simple, which is why more recent theories propose that workers were hired periodically and paid well for their labor, but again, no one can say for sure. That's all from the land of Egypt and its pyramids, and how we still don't know everything that's going on with them. Are you shocked that we still don't know the whole truth about the pyramids by now? Do you think we'll ever learn everything there is to know about the pyramids, or is our only hope time travel? Let me know what you think in the comments section down below. Thanks for watching and be sure to subscribe to see more.